Okay, we've been in this series in good faith. And just in case you missed it, last week we talked and shared about Elijah and the widow and her family. And there was this drought that took place and everyone was running on empty. And in good faith, the widow embraced her emptiness and watched God work. Right? She embraced her emptiness and watched God work. And maybe many of us have found ourselves in times and in seasons in life where we're just running on empty. And we don't have to be afraid of that. We actually get to have confidence that maybe empty is where God works best. And that's ultimately what he desires of us, is to empty ourselves, empty what we have, empty all of who we are so that God can continue to work best. See, what we learned last week was showing good faith is a humble but powerful way to live out our faith. Showing good faith is a humble but powerful way to live out our faith. In good faith, we stand here today celebrating 75 years as a church. What an honor to recognize that as a church we have a story, we have a history, we have an identity that all points, leads, and is centered in Christ. Before we share more about our history and our story of the church this morning, I want to read from Acts chapter 1, verse 14. See, it's so powerful because as I think about where we are today, where we've been, and maybe where we're going, I think about Acts chapter 1, verse 14. And Jesus has just gone to heaven. He's just gone, and the disciples and those that have loved Jesus and that Jesus has loved, and so many others have gathered together, and they went into this house that they were staying in. They went into the upper room, and they began to pray. Now, they began to pray about who was to replace Judas as the disciple. They began to pray about what was next. But I love this particular verse. It says, they joined together constantly in prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. I think as we hear this verse and as we see Jesus going up, it's so fitting for us this morning, because like those in Acts and those that have come before us and are with us now, we get to be people that seek the Lord in all that we do, that gather and seek and what? And pray. We will hear this throughout this morning over and over and over, because there's an importance to prayer. There's power in prayer. And the ways that we witness, the way we get to witness prayers of those that have called this church home is a witness and testimony to all those that come after. See, the reality is when we find ourselves in any situation, any circumstances, in the highs or the lows, right? We've been there. We've been people that we're experiencing the highs, right? And we've been people that have experienced the lows, but guess what? In good faith, pray. Whether you're here today and you're experiencing that high, or you're here today experiencing that low, can I just say, in good faith, pray. Pray. One of the things I was able to do when Jennifer and I was praying about coming here to Restoration, right? We were seeking the Lord, and we were trying to figure out, are we to leave where we're at and go and embrace something new? I began to check Restoration out online. Right, I began to go on the website, and I knew a little bit about Restoration, but I just wanted to do some of my own homework. And I loved when I got to the story and history of the church. I've shared this before, but it's one of my favorite things. There was a quote that said, we didn't go back because of the building. We went back because of the presence of God. If you go on there, it actually reads like this. A longtime member has told the story of when she and her husband first visited years ago, when the church building was only a basement. She commented that there was nothing impressive in the building's beauty, and often the basement would take on water, and people would have to move their seats to avoid the stream that flowed the length of the room. But she ended by saying, we decided to go back not because of the building, but because of the people and the presence of the Lord. See, sometimes in good faith, we need to welcome the presence of God before we welcome the presence of anything else. Right? I love that story because it really shows who we are. It really shows our heart's desire to be people that welcome the presence of God before we welcome the presence of anything else. We have been honored and blessed to still have a longtime member present with us. And we shared a little bit of this story a while back, maybe back in March. But we wanted to share this story again with you this morning because I just love it. And I think it's so fitting for us as we look at our 75th. We want to play that at this time.
It started from the Nazarene boys. They had an all-night prayer meeting. And there was about 6 or 7 boys at that church. And we just had girls at our church, at the Faith Mission. So they went to Brother Davis and asked if he would give them a building. So a year later, in 1949, he rented it's a tavern now on 7th Street. And we had the girls and the ones from Faith Mission and the Nazarene boys all got together and had Sunday schools and services in the little building. And then it grew. And Brother Davis called in Brother Kearney. And Brother Kearney, him and his family lived upstairs for just a little bit of the tavern. And then they began to get some of the adults coming in and wanted to really make a church. So they ended up, if I'm not mistaken, they put a tent up out here. And they had a tent revival. And later on then, that's when they decided to put the basement in. They put the basement in, and I know it was in 1950 because my cousin got married down there the same week that I got married, only I got married in the Faith Mission Church. And we did marry boys from the Nazarene Church. Mara and I got married then in 1950 in June, and we couldn't debate when we talked about it. The basement was built, and his family didn't want him leaving the Nazarene Church. And my family went to the Faith Mission, and my dad just had got saved all those years. He was an alcoholic. And so we ended up coming here. Then later on, we'd go back and forth at the 3 churches. And then we ended up here. Well, for one thing, we all stayed in the church. And everybody that was there, all the families, all their families was there. And all their kids. I mean, it just goes from one generation to the next. There has been 6 generations that's come through here. My grandmother, my dad and mom, me, Dixie, Dixie's kids, and Dixie's grandkids. That's still part of the church. I don't think they really realized what it really was to start out with. They thought it was just a little Sunday school class, just in the afternoon for kids in that end of town. But I don't think they really realized and dreamed that one day this church would be as big as it is.
I love that ending. I don't think they realized what it really was. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that the way God works? We don't really realize what we got. We don't really realize what we're doing when we're simply just acting in obedience and trying to be faithful. Right? When we gather and pray. And what started out as a Sunday school class or a Bible study for teenagers or for young adults began to be where we are now. It's amazing to think about this story. It really is, because in good faith, we are here. In faith, the presence of God was welcomed. It wasn't a building. It wasn't material things. It wasn't worship. It wasn't about anything else. They met in a basement that had water issues. They met in a tent because there was revival taking place. It was about the presence of God. Not only are we thankful to hear stories like this from those that call Restoration home, but we have been blessed here at Restoration to have previous pastors a part of this morning. In 75 years as a church, we've had 15 pastors. If you check the table down here in the fellowship hall, you're going to see some of the church history. And I just encourage you to go and spend some time looking at pictures, looking at some old articles, looking at some different things that just make up our history. But you're going to see a list of different pastors. One of them was, at the time, Pastor Brian Rogers. He was here when we celebrated our 50th anniversary, and I have some pictures of his time here. He couldn't make it, but he went ahead and sent me a list of 3 things that really stood out to him about his time here. He said this: our days were blessed as we served alongside the wonderful people at Davis Memorial. Leadership always desired to find, to understand, and do God's will. While there were many ways God provided and helped us grow in faith and number, 3 stand out. As we prayed and sought His will, God was faithful to provide a full-time youth pastor. We didn't know how we would afford it, but leadership had the vision and God had the provision prepared. Pastor Mark was fresh out of Tribeca, but God's hand was on him. God provided housing for the first year in a way only He could, and Pastor Mark was flexible to jump right in and make a huge impact from day one. Never could we have known the kingdom impact that Pastor Mark and his family would make. To God be the glory. If you look at that list out in the fellowship hall, you're going to see the longest tenured pastor at Restoration is Pastor Mark Thompson and his family. And I just want to invite them up here at this time if they want to come on up here. And I know they didn't expect this or know this was coming, but I want to just recognize them. I know that we're celebrating 75 years here at Restoration. And we're thankful for all that God is doing. But Pastor Mark, I believe 18 years, Pastor Mark we have been blessed by Pastor Mark and Allison and his family here for those years and all that God has done and is doing. As we welcome and celebrate those 18 years, we're thankful for the ways you served, the ways you've loved and cared for and shared life together with all of us. See, the one thing I know to be true, if you know this family, then I know you've seen Jesus. If you know this family, then I know you've seen Jesus. And I'm not just blessed to call them friends. I'm blessed to get to do life with them and ministry with them. And I just want us as a church to just show our appreciation to this wonderful family. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I had to pause there because as I read what Brian sent, and I think about this series we're in good faith. You know, in good faith, I believe the church took a chance. And I believe the Thompsons took a chance. And we've been blessed every day since. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for that. He continued and said, number 2, as we prayed and sought His will, God was faithful to provide as leadership looked outward to the community and made the decision to open a child care ministry. The vision has evolved through the years, but family after family have been impacted for the kingdom because the church had a vision to minister to children of the Bedford community and their families. Only eternity will reveal the lives changed as a result. To God be the glory. Only eternity will reveal the lives changed as a result. See, there's sometimes we, again, do something in good faith, and we'll never know on this side of heaven the results. We'll never know on this side of heaven what it may look like and the impact and the influence that we may have in good faith. But I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for the ways God has been faithful. He said, number 3, as we prayed and sought God's will, God was faithful to open the door to purchase the property across the street to add additional parking. And then with a few months went by, He opened the door to purchase a Chastain property where we were able to add a youth facility. We were hurting for space and didn't know what the solution was. But as we prayed and trusted, God was faithful to provide more than we knew we needed in ways we thought were impossible. Not only did he provide the property, but the finances as well. It was a privilege to serve and see God so faithful and work in powerful ways. I will always love the church there and pray that God continues to bless the future for you all just as he has the past. See, there was three things. I'm not sure if you caught it, but there was three things that he started each one of his points with. And it said this: as we prayed. As we prayed. In good faith, we are simply people that pray, right? In good faith, we are simply people that pray. As we look back, we see prayer has been not just what we do, it has been the people we are. We are people of prayer. Prayer is a practice that allows us to align our hearts to God's will. It is a practice that allows us to get out of the way and watch God work. As we pray, we seek God more than anything else over our own wills, our own ways, and our own plans. See, another pastor that many of you may know, but others may not, is Pastor Ken Bushy. Their family is loved by so many, and during their time, we saw a name change, right? We went from Davis Memorial to Restoration, but we also saw and witnessed God work through our childcare and daycare in ways that we never could have imagined. Pastor Ken was able to send us a video. We want to watch that at this time.
Greetings, Restoration Church. Jennifer and I would have loved to have been with you today as you celebrate this milestone of 75 years of ministry. Since we can't, this is the best we got. But thank you, Pastor Josh, for the invitation to give greetings. I know many of you, but for those that I don't, my name is Ken Bushy. And my wife, Jennifer, and I served at Restoration for 14 years. It was the growing up years for our three boys, Corbin, Jaden, and Evan. I'll always be grateful for how this church supported us, prayed for us, loved on us so well. I might have been known as your pastor, your teacher during that time, but I can tell you that you taught me during that time. I could go into great detail, tell lots of stories, but since we're celebrating the church's faith journey, I'd love to just retell one of my favorite stories of your faith. It was in early 2016. Church board was realizing the need for more space. So with the help of a grant, we contracted an architect who confirmed for us what we already knew, that any building project was going to be huge. It was going to have a huge price tag. It was going to be more than what we thought we should bite off. So in the middle of that process, we were made aware of the Inglewood school building that was on auction. As a church board, we were absolutely clear that we should bid on it. Additionally, we were absolutely clear on a max bid with the church's blessing, the district's blessing. We entered the auction, and very quickly we reached our max bid that we felt God would have us spend. And then we were outbid. And then that bidder, some of you remember the story, dropped out, and then we were outbid again. And we were disappointed. And at that point, the auction was coming to an end. We had an important decision to make. Would we increase the bid, or would we just stay at our max bid? It was Monday, April 4th, 2016. I was going to be meeting with the church board that night to discuss this, whether we should increase our bid or just kind of stay where we were. And that day I had lunch with a pastor friend, and I told him the situation. I'll never forget what he said to me in the midst of that conversation. He said this. He said, "This is what I believe, Ken." He said, "I don't think you'll increase your bid, and I don't believe you'll be the high bidder when the bidding is done, but I believe you'll get the property." And I thought that was really weird. Honestly, I think he thought it was weird too. He didn't bill himself as a prophet, typically. I openly expressed my doubts. There was no way the school board would take our bid over the others. I wasn't even sure they could. But, aren't you glad that sometimes God sends people to encourage us who have a greater faith than what we have? That night, I met as a church board, and we all wanted this building. But we strongly felt that if we were to increase our bid, we would be acting according to the flesh, not according to the Spirit. And so we made that decision to just wait it out. I had always known faith to be related to taking steps of faith. And I was learning, I think all of us were learning, that sometimes the risk of faith is standing still and allowing God to do what he is doing in the background, and just be faithful to his faithfulness. When we can't see how everything's going to turn out, resting the best we can in the promises that God is at work as we wait on him is probably the best thing for us to do. Well, the bidding closed and we lost. But you know what? You know where this is going. 2 weeks after we lost the bid, the original purchase fell through with the winning bidder, and we were awarded the building at our price, $80,000. Without increasing our bid, without being the high bid, we were the winning bid. Isn't God good? Isn't that a great story? On June 16th, we purchased the property. By August 15th, an astounding 8.5 weeks later, we had completely renovated the building and moved in ready for the new school year. It's a great story. And I just want to remind you today, this is your story. This is the story of Restoration Church. Sometimes God's going to ask us to step out into new territory, and that's going to take faith. Sometimes he'll ask us to just stand firm in immovable faith because he's at work and he wants us just to trust him. My faith grew through that story. Our faith grew through that. And that's just one story of your faith that has increased my faith. Maybe it's a good faith story for you to remember. I believe God has more good faith stories for us as we, in prayer, trust God more. Well, thank you again for letting me give you greetings today. Our love and our prayers continue with you all. We love you more than you could probably possibly know. Happy anniversary. 75 looks great on you. Grace and peace. The Lord goes with you.
So thankful for the stories that make us who we are. Just when you thought maybe it wasn't going to work out or maybe we should do something different, there was God. And he showed up. And we're coming up on 20 years. We've had a childcare or a daycare serving the community for almost 20 years, right? We're right there. And it started out here as the church. And per my records, Terry Richardson was one of the first directors with 8 kids. 8 kids. And now we're over here at Inglewood Ministry Center, and we have the playground, and God has just been so faithful. Right? He's been so faithful, and we've been able to serve the community. See, there's one thing we've learned by looking back to the story that Pastor Ken shared. It's this. In good faith, we are people that pray, but we're also people that trust in God. Right? We're people that pray, and we're people that trust in God. In Acts chapter 1, those that gathered to pray didn't just gather to seek an answer. Right? That wasn't their only thing. They didn't just gather to seek the will of God. Yes, they did all those things, but they gathered trusting in God. As they prayed, they trusted. As I think about the daycare and the ways that God has used the willingness of individuals to serve and to love, I think about the importance of not just seeking answers, but the importance of trusting God. See, that's our challenge this morning for us today. Can we be individuals that pray and trust in God? Can we be that church that gathers to pray and trust in God? In good faith, Peter got out of the boat and confirmed the miraculous of Jesus. In good faith, the boy with some fish and some bread gave what he had and confirmed the miraculous of Jesus. In good faith, the woman who was sick reached out and touched Jesus' clothes and was healed. In good faith, the tax collector Levi became the disciple Matthew. In good faith, a man lying on a mat by the pool to be healed got up and walked. See, in good faith, some friends lowered another through a roof and the miraculous of Jesus was on display. In good faith, after fishing all night, Peter cast his net on the other side as Jesus had told him to. In good faith, the disciples went around 2 by 2, preaching, teaching, loving on the sick, the lost, and the poor. In good faith, Paul began to pray and prison walls began to fall. In good faith, Jesus said, "Let the little ones come to me." In good faith, we, just like those before us, are individuals gathered together, trusting in God. Right? That's what we are in good faith. See, in good faith, our trust in God becomes our greatest witness. As we think about all that God has done and all that God is desiring to do, and who knows what the next 25 years and 50 years and 75 years looks like. But I can assure you this, in good faith, our trust in God becomes our greatest witness. As we trust in Him, our love for Him, in Him and for others and in others becomes greater. We're not led by our own understanding or our own will, but by Him. In good faith, we live into who He is. See, that's holiness. We've talked about that. That is the church. That is who we are called to be. A desire to live into who He is, watch Him work, and get out of the way. I want to challenge us today to be for the one. Do you remember that? To be for the one. See, it says in Matthew 5:6, to hunger and thirst for Him. Matthew says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Back in March, we had Pastor Michael Clark come, and he said something that was so profound. It's just stuck with me. I'm going to keep it probably for the rest of my life. You ready? I think some of you might remember it. But he said, "We should be so filled up that if a mosquito was to bite us, it would fly away singing, 'There's power in the blood.'" You remember that? I'm just wondering if that's who we should be as the church. Is if in good faith, our witness in trusting in God, if a mosquito were to bite us, it would fly away singing, "There's power in the blood." See, in good faith, let's believe, let's trust, and be so hungry for God that our prayer, our love, our trust becomes our witness. Folks, God is too good. He is too good not to celebrate. He is too good not to trust. He is too good not to surrender, to seek, to hunger and thirst for. He is too good not to watch Him work. As we look back, we have been people that have responded in good faith. And as we look ahead, we get to be people that continue to live in good faith. I just want to challenge us this morning to think about that. To think about 75 years. Some of you have been a part of that, maybe for a short time. Maybe some of you have been a part of that for a long time. I know some of us are brand new to the faith, and I know some of us here today, we've been serving Him all of our lives, and we've called Restoration home all of our lives. And for some of us, maybe Restoration, as of last week, has been home for a week, right? It's been home for a week. I just want us to think about that. Can we be people that pray and trust in God?